High God. Sound pretty familiar? Yeah, and that's all before Abraham ever became who Abraham was. And see how we just read over stuff, and it seemed like you'd be kind of like, well, wait a minute, hold up. Who is this guy? Why is the city called Salem? And how did he get to be the priest of the Most High God? And Abraham even got started yet. See, some things that would shock you to know, it's not that people are bringing stuff in and trying to negate it, but it's right there in the book, but we don't know it's there. So that's something to pay attention to. The student will begin to understand some of the chronological order of biblical history, which is more difficult sometimes than you may know, because you can read 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and you can read 1st Kings, and you're getting some of the same history, just said different ways. Kind of much like when you read the Gospels and you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John talking about the same life of Christ, but giving you different details. Same thing when you read like the Chronicles, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, 1st, 2nd Kings. A lot of the same events, sometimes in more detail, less detail, in some of the lists. You have to be careful with that when you get into those studies. They can go real deep because you will run into a lot of errors when you start to study those things. You'll run into things like, was it 33 chief workers that worked on, 3,300 chief workers that worked on the King Solomon's temple? Because when I go back and read Chronicles, it say 36. Like, what is it? And then you start having to really dig and study. But those are the peripheral issues that most of us, we don't pay attention to until you get in a situation or get a part of a certain group and they require you to go look at stuff a little bit closer. All right. So going further, these are the 3 dispensations. Remember, we talked about the patriarchal age. What you see on the first column talks about Adam. Everything starts with Adam. Adam, name, means red, or it can denote red, and it can also mean humankind. So it means first man or the man, and it also means humankind. So I could refer to everybody in here right now as Adam. You are humankind, or the world, or if I'm talking about humanity, I can say Adam. That's the natural man. That's the human being itself. And it starts there. We got Genesis 1:1. We see in the period coming all the way up until Exodus chapter number 19. Eden to Mount Sinai. So Eden is this special place. Eden is, when you look this up, is the place of the garden. Y'all familiar with that? Everybody know about that, right? Eden is the place of the garden. What's the garden? Well, let me just get some participation. When y'all hear that, or you think about the garden in a biblical context, what do you think of? Just what you see. No right or wrong answers. No judgment. What you see. Raise your hand. Tell me what you see. What does it look like in here? If you had to start telling us, oh, it looked like this, it looked like that, what would you say? Bunch of trees. Forest. Vegetation.
Jungle.
Flushness. Rich. Clean. Paradise.
Harmony.
Any limits on that? You know?
No.
You go.
As far as the eyes can see.
As far as the eye can see. Maybe. Beautiful. As far as the eye can see.
Waterfall.
Anybody here good? I love this.
Endless.
This is good. I didn't know y'all. Yeah, keep endless. Who said endless? Anybody got your blue letter Bible?
Yeah.
Just get the blue letter Bible and I want you to go to I think it's chapter 3 of Genesis. Or you could just look up the word garden. If you know how to use the word search by now. Let me know when you got it. So I'm gonna just talk, but I want you to look at the word garden, and we're gonna check that out. Remember all those descriptions that come to your mind now, because there may be a difference in your mind's eye and what the ancient person who wrote that was actually trying to say. Maybe I don't know. We finna find out.
I'm smelling flowers.
That's it. Yeah, feel good. No? It's
butterflies and birds.
Mm-hmm.
I know one thing, that you know that God is a God of beauty. Yes. Yeah. When you look at the earth, everything God put in place is beauty.
That's interesting. I ain't got time tonight, but Jeremiah said something about about, the earth being found desolate, disorganized, and destroyed. And, we sometimes take for granted that the waters were already hid. It says, the Spirit of God moved on the face of the deep. That's different. Because everything else speaks. He speaks. And boom. That's there. You hover. Then you speak. And then boom. Y'all miss what I just said? Because see, when I thought like this, what's going to happen, you will hesitate in a moment to either see what you want to see or see what's really there. All right, so anybody got it yet? But you got it in the blue of the Bible? All right, and you got to go to a verse with the word garden in it. And all right, now go to your concordance. Let's see what the garden is. When we look at what the word, the ancient word, and what we have. I'm doing this to make a point of why it's important that you become an investigator or a studier of this Bible so that you gain understanding, that it becomes, see, sometimes it's like when we think it's the same old thing, we don't really care to watch it. We don't really care to study it. Maybe I need to shock you into saying, look, this ain't what you might have thought. Oh, you might want to take a closer look. And maybe we'll get interested in studying. Were y'all able to put it up yet? All right, so what we got? What are we doing? What we got?
Garden, and it is the pronunciation gan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a masculine or feminine noun, proper located noun.
Locative meaning dealing with a place.
So the first definition for garden, enclosure. The A definition is enclosed garden, figurative of a bride. The B definition is garden of plants. And when you're talking about a proper or locative noun, the C definition is the Garden of Eden.
So, the primary, what you're going to find out when you look this up in your context and you roll with this garden is also an enclosure. And you say, well, what about all the others? Remember, your words have meanings in sentences. Sentences have meanings in paragraphs, and they make your whole story. Because now it has to make sense with what came in chapter 1. And I'm saying this to get you to study it, because when you go back to chapter 1, it's much more expansive on creation. It's much more expansive on I think it's around 24, 26 of chapter 1. So when you take the Bible for granted or think you already know, and we don't study it a little bit closer, it becomes kind of mundane. You may need to go back and check out some of this stuff just so we'll know a little bit more about it.
But I'm interested in the definitions, and you're seeing some of the same.
Eastward and Eden. And then what? Put Adam over there. So that wasn't everything. There was a limitation to this garden that sometimes we think of as endless in our own mind. Sometimes we think of it that way. But we would be wrong. So going further, there's just something to think about, the atmosphere and how things were going to look to Adam and those coming out of there.
Let me get this right. You say when Garden of Eden, when it started out, it was just a garden, it was put there. That what you said?
That ain't what I said.
That's what you said.
I'm repeating to you what
at
it
it
is
like
said.
when, Adam and Eve, like the whole earth was just a big garden where they lived.
See, that's what I was getting at.
Okay.
That's what we pictured
Yeah.
Right.
without going back and being, careful about what's being actually said. Because we take for granted, God planted a garden eastward in Eden. And we forget all that location that I just said, eastward in Eden. We forget that. He planted a garden, and it's expansive, and it's beautiful. And it didn't say that. It said he planted a garden eastward. and it means enclosure primarily.
Saying is true, because in the Bible it says that even when he kicked them out, he put the guards up, and I'm sorry if I
No,
stole
that's
this.
out in the Garden of Eden. We come all the way up, and we're at this point until the Ten Commandments are given, and you'll find that Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through about 17. You'll see that Deuteronomy 5 through about 21. And you need to see of it mentioned over there in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 23. So here comes the written law. Did y'all hear what I said?
Written law.
Because they had some kind of law before that.
Yeah.
And we ain't go to the scriptures. We found there's a Melchizedek. You go look them up. You'll find out they understood certain things. They made sacrifices. They had something going on. But then the written law, written on tablets of stone, did not come unto the mountain. You ever thought it was interesting that Moses would have these tablets written by the finger of God, get mad and destroy them?
Yep. He was ticked.
So God said, okay, you gonna write it.
Yeah, how dare you?
You gonna write it.
There you go.
You gonna write it. I'm finna say something, but it won't negate. Y'all just listen to what I'm finna say and think about it. Acts 7. Where Acts 7? Maybe Acts 7:14. I could be wrong. I think it's Acts 7:14. Or it might be 20 or 22. Because them numbers get mixed up. Now, so they go up, they get to the mountain, and when they get to the mountain, Moses is up there a long time, y'all. Long time. He would say, he dead. Aaron say, okay, give me the earrings. Listen, y'all, listen. Give me the earrings out your ears. Men and women. Give me the earrings out your ears. And they gonna beat that into a golden what?
Calf.
All right. There's a reason for that. But we'll get to that in more advanced time. We got it yet? Yeah. Acts 7. I want the verse that says that Moses was trained in all of the wisdom. Try. It's in 7. It's either 20, 22. What you got, bro?
7 to 10.
20. Okay. What does 7:22 say?
And Moses was learned
Mm-hmm.
in all the wisdom of the Egyptians,
Okay.
and was mighty in words and in deeds.
So, y'all hear that? All right, listen. Cause this is me. I'm telling you what I'm doing without just doing it. Trying to see some mystery so that you go study. So here's Moses, who's trained in all of the what?
Egyptian.
Who? This is the same Moses that went to the mountain,
Right.
got the word written on what?
Stones.
He got mad and destroyed what with it? He threw it at. What did he destroy with them stones?
The law.
That bull that they made. Dog, I gotta go back up here and I gotta bring the law back down. What you gonna write it on, Moses? See, that's why you in my class.
There it is.
That's why. Now, if you didn't get it, that's okay. It's okay. Just go
was
to
educated.
Google and type in written in stone. You'll be alright. Or just think about what you know about what is written in stone and where he came from and how that would look.
Paragraphs.
That's the thing. Moses was trained in all of the wisdom of the Egyptians.
So Egyptians always
They
have
didn't
images.
enslave. They
Yeah.
didn't enslave. And they'll tell you this themselves when you look it up. They don't have a language at this point. The only language they have is the language of the land that they are indigenous to. But we know what that looks like. So Moses was writing, and he could write. He was trained.
Right.
He wasn't raised in any household. He was raised in
Pharaoh's.
Pharaoh is also an initiate. They understood what's called the Medinetta, the words of God in their language. Now that I'm a messed y'all, all right, the Christian age. So we move from the mountain, and from the mountain, we go all the way through this period of time. We have Moses is believed to be the person that wrote the first 5 books. You ever wonder how, wait a minute, you got patriarchal age. Moses wasn't born way back there with them. He wasn't back there watching great-granddaddy Adam do nothing. So, either this was directly given to him, spiritual download somehow, or if it's not a spiritual download, if he wasn't whispering in his ear, he would have had to get the story the same way we would have kind of got the story.
Told.
However, you would have want to take that. Most of us, I believe, probably choose to believe God just gave it to him. That's fine. I'm not making that point tonight. But the point is that he was not there, but he writes of an earlier time period.
Right.
Y'all following that? So while Moses is writing, this is why when you get to books like Job, Job is a book written before Moses was ever born. But when Moses wrote, he wrote of an earlier time. And this is why when we talk about the chronology of the Bible, I'm bringing out time tonight. That's why it's important for you to kind of conceptualize that. Because we need that when you get to the New Testament and you start reading things like, oh, all scripture. We just take for granted. For us, all scripture means the New Testament too. For them, it didn't mean that. And that helps you see what they are going through. Now you can see right. Because not until you observe correctly can you interpret correctly. And not until you interpret correctly can you now apply to your life. If you always keep seeing it the way that you think it is, rather than the way it really is, you will always get the wrong interpretation. Moses was of the tribe of Levi. So was Aaron. But all the Levites into the Egyptians, I don't care if you were Levite or not, you was out there making brick without straw.
Right, but didn't they have knowledge before then of everything that happened before?
Let me understand what you're saying, because see, what you have to do is go back. The first presence, or supposedly the first presence, you got Joseph being sold down there into they're still out east.
Right.
So Joseph grows up. Now, this is a good point too, though. His brothers who look like him see him and don't recognize him.
Because in their mind, they think he dead.
Yeah.
No,
where they already sold him off.
That ain't why they didn't recognize him.
And he was in chiefly apparel.
Yeah.
He was in chiefly apparel.
Color would have been different too.
Huh? Say that again.
His color
Huh?
Yeah.
would have been different.
I'm just saying, if who
we
we being told built that stuff and was over there, then I would immediately recognize who my brother is if he looked like me, because we know the people that was there then at that time looked like me. Y'all, some of y'all listen.
I got you, bro.
So, what I'm saying though about that is going up to that time when they knew not Joseph. When that happened, you got over 200 and more years of slavery, and all that the priesthood and all this. They don't have any written law. They never had it.
Okay.
Because that doesn't come until after they get to the mountain.
Got it.
So God is the one that determines, how they're going to be divided up and who the Levites are, but they don't have a law yet.
As of yet.
So he chooses Aaron and Moses. You remember that? And Aaron and Moses carried things on. But I just wanted to point out to you how he destroyed them first tablets, and it's written in stone. It still is written in stone. I said that. So, Christian age. Today we are not under the Old Testament law. We have Romans chapter 6, and it lets us know you've been raised and brought to something new in Christ. We are saved by grace. What does that mean? That you don't just simply get it because he died. You have to accept it, but it's not of your own merit. You still have to accept. Accepting, if there's any method or merit or whatever, something you have to do, that's just it. You have to accept the gift. You can refuse the gift, okay? But you can't work for it.
Right.
You can't earn it. Nothing about it says, oh, well, since you did, it's not since you did such, da, 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 you so good, I give you the gift. No, you have to accept it, okay? We are to follow the teachings of Christ. We see Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 5. Guess what happened there? We back up on the mountain again. Back up on the mountain again. Up on that mountain.
Yep.
And guess who come to the mountain? Moses. And this other guy named Elijah. That's just the other guy that never died. Just like he didn't die. So pretty special guy, right? So they come to the mountain, they chat with Jesus. And Peter sees it. I always wondered, this was a question of mine. So how does Peter know what Moses and Elijah looked like?
I know.
How did he know that? But anyway, I don't know, maybe they had little names over their head or something, little glowing smoke with their names. So maybe he heard Jesus say, hey, Moses, or something like that, and say, oh, that must be Moses, that must be Elijah right there. I don't know. The point is, that's what it say, they was on the mountain, and then when he got all excited, he said, you know what, we need to make 3 places of worship, okay, to represent these 3. Okay, you got Moses, Elijah, Jesus, the cloud, the voice comes out the cloud and say, no, this is who my beloved son, whom I am well pleased, hear ye him. Moving forward, members of the church are under the New Testament law. You see this, Jesus saying, upon this rock I'll build my church. And then you read further about how he gave himself once for the law over there in the book of Hebrews, talking about the sacrifices and things that would come. All right, so review real quick. So we got 3 dispensations. We have the patriarchal dispensation, the Mosaic dispensation, and we have the Christian dispensation. The patriarchal covers from the time of Adam all the way up until the time of Exodus chapter 20 when they get the law on the mountain, all the way through their captivity, all the way through the part of Joseph going into Egypt and being accepted as second in command, and his brothers coming to get food and everything, and they didn't recognize him from them because they all looked just alike. They all looked like the same people. They were not Germanic northern people, okay? Because they would have said, you different. Who are you? You're not like the Egyptians. No, because he looked just like the Egyptians, just like everybody else looked, just like the Egyptians, just like Jesus was able to go to Egypt.
Looked like them.
Yeah. But anyway.
You know what you're saying, right?
I know what
Oh, you know what he's saying.
I just don't know if everybody else
Understanding what he's saying.
Oh, I know exactly.
I knew you did, I just wanted to confirm that.
That's why I get in so much trouble, because I said it. But it's true. It's true. So when you go through those dispensations and you get through Moses, and then you have from that time period, and you don't hear anything else, the law is there, you hear from the prophets, you have 400 years between the last book of the Old Testament until we get to the time of Christ. It's called that silent period. That's what it's called. Pausing because there are things that were written and considered good history, accurate history. It's just that it was decided it shouldn't be in there. Okay, so I'm not talking about whether it should or not, but history is history. I mean, it is what it is. I don't need slavery of America written in the Bible to know that it happened.
Right.
Hey.
So what I'm telling you is you can get more context by understanding what was going down even in that point of history of getting to the point of Christ. Because that will tell you how the people, how things changed, how they came from the north, and how they, sought to paint the images of their faces in the book of the law. I'm so scared to even tell y'all where that came from, but time of, like a timeline of the three dispensations, you have the creation week. At the very top, that top black bar, that represents the life of Adam. Adam lived for 930 years. Now, can be some discrepancy of maybe a few years or months, because some ancient peoples worked off a calendar of the 360 days versus the Gregorian that we work off of today of a 365 day, 64 day, or whatever. So it's not all the same. But how do you keep it intact? Well, you have to again go back to something that for some reason we'd be scared to go back to. The Most High said, I'm gonna put some lights in the sky so that you'll be able to tell what time it is, basically. And if you follow those things through the sky, and there's a measurement and it's a set order, and so when you do all of that, you can come up and they can keep track of how old they were. They understood the repeating cycles of the celestial. This is when you start to understand how much attention they paid to it, and you hear it in other circles, and we get afraid of it because we never heard of the word esoteric, but it just simply means something you don't know or something that's hidden. This is what they mean when they say as above, so below, because they studied this stuff and they tried to understand it. It was important. It was important to know what was happening up there, so they knew when to plant, so that they could do different things in the earth, and they knew what they could tell weather and all these other different things by being very, very, okay, if that's not important to you, just tell me how they knew that Jesus was born. So a lot of people when I go there, they say, oh, well, they must have read the scripture.
No, what the scripture baby.
That's funny to me because of this. I'll tell you why. Those same folk don't realize what they're saying. Because the Bible itself didn't say that they read scripture. The Bible itself tells you what it was. And if you trust what it's telling you, then you have to go back to what he told you way back in Genesis and demystify this and stop making something evil. Because he has pain. And I'm gonna get it after I get you. I'm gonna tell you what's evil and what's good, and it's the same thing. And you can use it for good, and you can use it for bad.
That's right.
But it depends on who is the possessor of it. Now see, if I know that, and you don't know it, I can manipulate.
Yep.
But if I choose to teach you, hey, this fruit right here is called knowledge, and it can go this way or this way, but this is the more righteous cause for usage of it. Now see, that's a person that's not afraid of what you will become and do with it. But if I don't want you to know that, and I want to tell you that, I be sections and seeing them through the scriptures from the beginning to the mountain of Sinai, from Sinai to Christ, and then from Christ forward into this Christian age. So one thing I like to point out, so when Adam dies at about 930 years, he quite possibly could have known Lamech. He was still alive when Lamech got here. It's quite possible. And when you're passing down information, and who knows what these individuals knew about the earth, living 900 years and being able to pass it on, being 130 years old and still having children, and being able to pass on knowledge to them, and then they gonna live probably another 800 from that point. That's a lot of knowledge being shared. Look at Enoch. He didn't die, but he got on the scene. Adam was still on the scene when Enoch came. And Enoch dies, or not dies, but he's translated, I want to say it's 365. 365. And then from there, you get Methuselah, you get Lamech, who is Noah's father. Noah's there, and Noah takes us on to the period post-flood. When you hear the word antediluvian, they're talking about before the flood, okay? Or so anything post-flood, we're going after the flood times. Now, keep in mind, we started at Adam. We went 130 years, and we know when these individuals were born, according to the scriptures. So when you start to move up, this chart takes us all the way up down at the very bottom of the map and brings us up to known time. At the very bottom of the map, you'll see Joshua at the bottom and then Moses up there. So what just happened? We just went from the beginning of time all the way over to a time that we know. Because we do know. And then you got Joseph, you got Moses, you got Amram, who was Moses' father. Then you got Joseph, where it says 110, when it says 1702 down there. That is the time that Joseph is in Egypt. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? That's after the flood. And that's BC time. So 700, let's say about 1700 BC, Joseph is in Egypt. So what does that mean? So back over here, our best estimation is that things got started around 4000 or 4004 BC. Y'all got that? Why y'all look like y'all thinking hard? 4000 BC. Y'all know about your BC. I won't take it for granted. Y'all know your BCs. Y'all know what the difference is. But you know how to add it. You know when we pass the period, there is no year zero. So when we get back before Christ, it starts to count up in a negative sense. It's kind of like a number line. So everything that you see where the cross would be or thereabout, really that line is slightly before it. If there was a year zero, that's what that would represent. The cross would represent 33 years after that little line.
Right.
That's where so everything going back toward the orange, you start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 till you get all the way up to 1,000 going in the negative direction.
Right.
And then the same thing going the other way, going all the way up. That's why you can have 1,000 over here, but it's going in the other direction. Y'all seeing this? What year is it?
Now?
Now.
2019.
All right.
I'm like, what? Hold on. 2019.
It sounds simple to you, but it only sounds simple because you might not be thinking what I'm thinking. So it's 2019, and at the beginning, what did I say in the beginning back there?
4,000.
All right. Next slide. I'll let y'all do the thing.
Oh, he went with the full.
So all